I didn't expect grief to show up in a room full of people laughing at bad stage directions, but it did. The community theatre building smelled like old curtains and coffee that had burned itself to bitterness hours ago. In the hallway, the walls were the same peeling beige they'd been when I first auditioned 2 years back. Always beige, always tired, always somehow stubborn enough to keep hosting dreams. I stood near the costume rack with my script open, pretending the pages were the only thing I was reading. My hands kept going back to the margins, to the pencil marks I'd made earlier, like if I erased enough, there'd be room for a different reality. In my chest, grief felt like someone had laid a heavy hand over my sternum and refused to lift. Not loud, not theatrical, just constant pressure, like breathing through cloth. The grief had a name attached to it, even if I never said it out loud. My sister. She was the kind of person who laughed with her whole body, who could make strangers feel like they were already friends. She died in late winter, and since then, everything had moved in slow, careless increments. Meals I forgot to finish, calls I promised I'd return, days that blurred together like fog. I told myself theatre was a place where life came back. I didn't tell myself it would hurt. When the director finally gathered us in the rehearsal room, his voice carried the practiced brightness of someone who refused to let the building collapse. "We're still doing the production," he said, like stating a weather report. "We're still doing it together." And yes, because casting changes happen, there's a new partner assignment for the understudy scenes. He held up a clipboard. The others murmured, people shifting their bags on their shoulders, rolling their eyes like partners were a mild inconvenience, rather than a chance for the universe to rearrange you. Then his eyes landed on me. "Nathaniel," he said, and I felt myself stiffen the way you do when someone calls your name in a crowd you don't want to be seen in. "You're paired with Caleb for the intimacy beats." Caleb stepped forward as if he'd been standing there already, rehearsing his calm. He didn't look like an actor who chased attention. He looked like someone who was used to doors not opening, and he'd learned to stop pushing. He wore a fitted black rehearsal shirt with the sleeves slightly pushed up, and the light caught the small silver ring on his index finger when he flexed it. My first thought was irritation, sharp and immediate. Not because Caleb was terrible. He wasn't. He was talented, yes, and his read-on character was precise, but he had this habit during rehearsals. He talked with his hands, then suddenly stopped when anyone suggested emotions might be real. He treated vulnerability like an optional accessory. The second thought came slower. I knew Caleb's story in the way the theatre community knows things, through whispers and careful half-answers. There were rumors he'd been straight enough for long enough that nobody bothered to check. There were rumors about exes, and then rumors about the exes that never made it to introductions. Rumors were one thing. Being assigned to him was another. I opened my mouth to respond with something neutral, professional. I wanted to be the kind of person who didn't have a private reaction to every assigned partner. But my throat felt dry anyway. "Okay," I managed. Caleb's gaze met mine for less than a second, long enough for something in me to recognize him as more than a face attached to a role. His expression didn't change into anything dramatic. It just settled deeper, like he'd already made a decision and was waiting for the world to catch up. "Caleb and Nathaniel," the director continued, clapping his hands once, "you two will work the scene where the grief hits, but you have to play it like you're choosing each other, even when you shouldn't choosing each other." I almost laughed, in the same breath, in the same room, with my sister's absence sitting like furniture in my life. I turned toward the stage space, the wooden floor scuffed from decades of shoes. A wall of mirrors stood at the side, and the room's harsh lights made everyone look more honest than they probably felt. I stared at the rehearsal space like it could give me an instruction manual for surviving the moment. Caleb approached from the other side of the set. His steps were quiet. He didn't announce himself with energy. He positioned himself a careful distance away, as if space was his first language. "We do it like..." "What?" he asked. His voice had a steadiness that made you believe he already knew how it would go, even if he hadn't tried it yet. I flipped my script open, keeping my thumb pressed to the page as if I might lose it. "Like the character doesn't have permission to fall apart," I said. "But still does." Caleb's mouth twitched, almost a smile, almost amusement. "So, control it," he said, "and then let it slip." I studied his hands. The ring glinted again as he moved them slightly. "You've got that line down," I said, even though we hadn't practiced it yet. He looked at me then, properly this time, and the light softened around him. "I've had practice," he replied. "Not just theatre practice. Something older, something he didn't hand out for free." Marin, our stage manager, drifted closer with a clipboard and a tape roll hanging from his belt, like he'd been born organized. "Okay," Marin said, clapping lightly. "Start with a beat before the pause. The audience needs to feel it before they can name it." We began. Caleb took his mark by the imaginary doorway. I stood opposite, hands at my sides, trying not to feel like I was holding my breath. The scene was supposed to be intimate, but intimate in theatre terms meant closeness with rules. You move your body with control, you keep your boundaries clear, you don't let anyone mistake staging for invitation. The first run-through was clean and cold, like two people reading a weather map. I hit my lines, Caleb hit his responses. We adjusted when Marin called out corrections. But somewhere between the second repetition and the third, I felt the air change. It wasn't romantic in the way you see in movies. It was subtler. It was the moment when our eyes met, and my focus stopped being about the script. Caleb's breathing shifted, barely noticeable, but my body noticed. I became aware of his closeness not as a problem, but as a fact. During a pause, Marin walked behind us. "Hold there," he instructed. "Nathaniel, soften your jaw when you say it, Caleb. Stop looking like you're bracing for impact." Caleb exhaled through his nose. He didn't argue. That alone felt like something. We started again, and this time, when I said my lines, I didn't picture a character. I pictured my sister's hands, how she used to reach across tables to steal fries, how she'd squeeze my wrist when she was trying to calm me down without making it a big deal. My voice caught at the end of a sentence. Caleb noticed immediately. He stepped closer, not all the way, but closer than before. His shoulder angled toward mine, like he was offering shelter without claiming it. "Again," Marin said, but his tone wasn't scolding. It was careful. I swallowed, trying to reset. "I'm fine," I said automatically. I hated how it sounded like a lie even to me. Caleb's eyes didn't leave my face. "You don't look fine," he said quietly. The room went quieter around us. People still moved, tape still unfolded, but my world narrowed to the space between our bodies. "I'm acting," I replied. Too fast. He didn't challenge me. He simply nodded like he understood the difference between acting and pretending. "Then act like you believe it," he said. That was the first time he sounded like he cared about my honesty. Not like he needed me to stay controlled. Like he wanted the emotion to be real. After rehearsal, the theatre crowd spilled out into evening. Folding chairs, car doors shutting, a few volunteers laughing near the vending machine. Marin handed me a schedule sheet and added, "You'll run the partner blocking tomorrow at 6. I nodded, then found my feet moving toward Caleb without deciding to. He was gathering his script and slipping it into a folder. His posture was relaxed, but his movements were slightly too precise, like he was making sure nothing could spill. "You didn't look uncomfortable," I said, surprising myself. When I got stuck." He looked up. Why would I be? I almost told him the truth then, because I was always afraid of being seen. Because grief made me feel like I was leaking something people didn't want to touch. Because I didn't trust the part of me that wanted comfort. Instead, I said something safer. "You're good," I offered. "You make it easy to reset." Caleb's expression softened. "It's not easy," he said. "It just feels easier when I'm not doing it alone." My chest tightened. Not because it was romantic, because it was human. It carried no flirtation, no game. It sounded like a confession wrapped in practicality. Marin called out from the doorway, "If either of you needs the projector room, it's free tonight." "Quick practice, then lock up." Caleb glanced at Marin. "I'll stay," he said, like it was an inconvenience he was choosing. Then his gaze returned to me. "If you want," he added, cautious in a way he hadn't been in rehearsal, "we can run it once more." I should have said no. I should have gone home and let my grief chew on me in private where it was familiar. But the building had a gravity. The idea of being inside again, inside that stage space where my sister's laughter lived like an echo, felt like walking toward a warm light. "Okay," I said. We moved into the projector room at the side of the theater. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly. The screen hung like a blank promise. Caleb closed the door behind us, and the sound of it clicking made my stomach dip. The room smelled like dust and old electronics. I could hear the distant hum of traffic outside, muffled by thick walls. "Do you remember the beat where the character touches the frame?" Caleb asked. "Yeah," I replied, flipping to the page. Caleb stood a few feet away from me, then mirrored my movements when I began. Our bodies learned each other slowly. Wrong steps, corrected by instinct. When my line came out too raw again, Caleb didn't laugh or brush it off. He simply stepped closer, like he was giving my words somewhere to land. "Stop," he said during a pause. I froze. "What?" His eyes flicked to my hands. "Your fingers are tense," he said. "When you say it, you grip like you're afraid of losing what you're holding." I stared at my own hands. I couldn't remember gripping. I couldn't remember deciding. Caleb approached carefully, leaving space between us until his presence warmed the air. He pointed, not touching at first, at the exact angle of my wrist. "Relax," he murmured. "Let it be." Sad, but not trapped. The proximity was small, but it was enough to make my heartbeat audible. My skin felt too aware of itself. I swallowed. "You talk like you know what it feels like," I said. Caleb's eyes held mine for a long moment. "I do," he answered. Then he added, almost too quietly, "Just not in the way you think." My throat tightened. It wasn't fear, exactly. It was the tension of realizing you've been reading someone wrong. "Caleb," I said, stopping myself right before I could ask the question that would change everything. He watched me carefully. "You're scared," he observed. "I'm not scared," I lied again. Caleb's mouth curved, not amused. "You are," he said gently. "Because you keep trying to be the kind of person who doesn't need anyone." I felt heat rise behind my eyes. I hated that he could see through my carefulness. "I don't know what you are," I said, and the words came out harsher than I meant. "Everyone's got a story for you. Everyone talks." Caleb flinched like I'd thrown something. Then he steadied himself. "They don't know me," he said. "They know what they want." I wanted to apologize immediately, but the grief in me had a stubborn nerve. "So what do you want?" I asked. Caleb exhaled, and the sound trembled. He looked at the screen behind me, then back at my face. "I want to stop pretending," he said. My breath caught. Pretending about what? He didn't answer right away. His gaze traveled down for half a second, toward my mouth. Then away, like he couldn't decide if honesty was safe. When he spoke, it was slow. "Pretending that I don't care when you go quiet," he said. "Pretending I'm just professional. Pretending I'm straight when I'm not." The words landed like a stage light, cutting through smoke. I stared at him. I didn't know what to do with the fact that he'd said it out loud. not because I didn't want it. Because wanting it made me feel guilty and greedy at the same time. Caleb's jaw tightened like he was bracing for rejection. "I'm not asking you to say anything," he added. I can't keep watching you carry it alone. Not when I'm standing right here." My heart pounded. Painfully. In my mind, my sister's voice rose like a memory, her joking, her teasing, her insistence that love was never something you could postpone until you were ready. I forced myself to breathe. "When you say you're not straight," I whispered, needing the words to become real. Caleb gave a small nod. "I'm Caleb," he said, and then corrected himself quickly like he didn't want the conversation to turn into a label. "I'm me. I've just been living like the safest version was the only version." There was a silence where my fear and my hope stood shoulder to shoulder. I should have pulled back. I should have made it easy. But grief had made me tired of easy. "I'm scared too," I admitted, surprising myself with how true it was. "Not of you. Of what it means if we're real." Caleb's expression shifted relief, cutting through caution. "Then be real with me," he said. The next moment wasn't romantic fireworks. It was a question offered on trembling hands. Caleb reached out and touched my wrist lightly, right where my grip had been too tight. His fingers weren't claiming me, they were asking. My body responded before my brain could decide. I didn't pull away. Caleb leaned closer. "Do you want?" he started. I interrupted with honesty because I couldn't survive another second of pretending. "Yes," I said, and it felt like tearing open a sealed letter. His breath hitched. The air between us changed temperature. He kissed me once, carefully, like he was learning the shape of my heartbeat. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't trying to prove anything. It was the kind of kiss you gave someone when you believed you'd waited too long. When we pulled back, our foreheads nearly touched. Caleb's eyes were shining, and he looked embarrassed by how much he felt. I cupped his hand, still holding his ringed finger, still aware of the smallness of his gesture. "I don't want to lose this," I said. "We won't," he replied, and then softened the statement with something kinder. "Not like before." Not silently. Somewhere outside the projector room, the theater building settled with a creak. The distant sound of Marin locking up drifted through the walls. We practiced the scene again after that, because theater always insisted on continuing. But the lines weren't the point anymore. The point was that we'd become a truth neither of us could unlearn. Later, when we finally stepped out into the main hall, night clung to everything. The lobby lights were dimmer, giving the walls a gentler color. The poster for our production hung crooked, as if even the theater couldn't stand perfectly straight anymore. Marin met us near the doors with a tired smile. "You two finished?" he asked. Caleb cleared his throat. "Yeah," he said. Marin looked between us like a person who already knew more than he was letting on. "Good," he replied. Then he paused. "Just remember your partners, not just on stage." Caleb's shoulders loosened, like that sentence let him exhale for the first time in months. I should have felt like I'd done something reckless. Instead, I felt like I'd stepped into a warmer room. Like grief didn't disappear, but it stopped being the only thing in the house. We walked out together into the cold air. The sky was heavy with stars you could only see when the city went quiet for a second. Our breath made ghostly clouds. Caleb held my hand without thinking about it. His fingers fit against mine with a calm that scared me more than the kiss had. "I thought you'd want space," he admitted. "I did," I said honestly, "until you said you weren't pretending anymore." He glanced at me, eyes searching. "And you," I swallowed, letting the truth stretch into the open air. "I thought I'd be alone forever." I said, "I thought love was something I'd borrow from other people's lives." And then you kept staying after rehearsal." Caleb's lips pressed together, and for a second he looked like he might cry, but refused to let it happen in public. "I'm sorry it took me so long," he murmured. "Don't apologize," I said. "Just don't go back to pretending." He nodded, and in the night it felt like a promise he was still learning how to keep. The next days weren't easy. Theatre still demanded repetition. Grief still arrived in moments on the bus, in the bathroom at home, in the quiet after rehearsal when the building emptied and I remembered my sister again. But now grief had company. Now my heart had someone to lean into. Caleb and I worked the production with a new kind of attention. During one rehearsal, Marin asked us to run the scene as if the character was forgiving someone without knowing how. I looked at Caleb, and I could see in his face that he was fighting the urge to protect himself by being cold. I felt the urge to hide, too, but then Caleb whispered, "Let it hurt." And when I nodded, I realized that was the real instruction. Not how to act, how to live. Opening night arrived like a tide you couldn't stop. The stage lights flared bright. The audience rustled as people took their seats. The back wall of the theatre was painted the color of late summer, warm enough to trick your mind into believing everything would be okay. My sister's absence sat with me backstage like an extra cast member. Caleb was beside me, adjusting the collar of his costume, but his hands trembled slightly. "Hey," he said quietly. I looked at him. "What?" He shook his head once like he was clearing nerves. "I keep thinking, if I let myself feel this, I'll break something," he admitted. I stared at him, then took his hand. "We already broke something," I said softly. "We broke the lie." Caleb's eyes filled. He blinked hard. "I don't want to be your mistake," he whispered. "You're not," I said. "You're the first honest thing that's happened since she left." The words made my throat hurt, but I didn't regret them. When we stepped onto the stage for our partner beats, the script became a map for a reality we'd already begun to live. Our bodies moved with familiarity now, not just choreography. When we reached the moment where the character touches the frame, my fingers finally relaxed. I didn't grip the past, I held the present. At the final curtain call, the audience erupted into applause. The cast moved like a single organism, bowing, smiling, laughing through exhaustion. Caleb and I stood close at the edge of the stage, absorbing the noise. He leaned toward my ear and whispered, "You did it." I wanted to tell him that he did too, that without his courage, my grief would have remained a locked room. After the show, people came up with compliments. Marin handed out congratulatory hugs. Someone told Caleb he had beautiful control. Caleb thanked them politely, but his eyes kept flicking to mine like he was checking if I was still there. When the crowd thinned, when the theatre finally quieted into the afterglow of applause, I saw Marin step back and give us space. It felt deliberate, protective. Caleb guided me out toward the side hall, toward the quiet doors that led back into rehearsal rooms. "Come on," he said. I followed him past the bulletin board of old flyers, summer auditions, benefit performances, a photo of the theatre group from years ago where my sister stood smiling, her arm around someone else. I didn't realize until then how often I'd been avoiding her memory in plain sight. In the hallway, Caleb stopped and turned to face me fully. His eyes were steady now, but his voice wasn't. "I need to tell you something," he said. My stomach tightened. "What?" He took a breath. "When I first realized I wasn't straight," he began, "I thought I'd have to disappear to survive. I thought it would be safer to act like love was a joke. Like I was just passing through." He swallowed, then continued. "Then you started carrying your sister's grief like it was heavy enough to crush you, and somehow you still showed up. You still acted. You still stood there and gave people a version of courage." I didn't move. I couldn't. "And you?" I asked. "I wanted to be the kind of man who didn't run," he answered. "But I was terrified. Terrified that if I was honest you'd see me as too complicated." I felt my eyes sting. "Too complicated?" Caleb's jaw tightened. "You deserve something simpler," he said. Then his face changed, urgent. "But I don't think life is simple. I think it just pretends to be." His honesty made the air feel thick. I wanted to comfort him and also demand comfort from him, but I didn't want to turn his confession into my own rescue mission. So I told the truth I hadn't let myself say yet. "I'm not asking for simpler," I whispered. "I'm asking for real." Caleb's expression broke open, and for a second he looked younger, like someone who'd been waiting to be allowed to feel safe. "Then stay with me," he said. "Not just as partners. Not just as theater people." I should have been cautious. I should have asked for time. I should have let grief and romance sit at a distance like strangers. Instead, I nodded. I reached for him, slow and deliberate, and pressed my forehead to his chest. His heartbeat thudded through his costume fabric. "I can't promise I'll never spiral," I admitted. "Grief doesn't obey. But I can promise I won't do it alone anymore." Caleb's arms came around me, firm but gentle. "Then I'll promise too," he said. "I won't go back to pretending, even if I'm scared." Somewhere in the theater, a loose light fixture clicked softly as it cooled. The building felt like it was holding our breath. We stood like that until the last of the night settled around us. When we finally pulled apart, Caleb kissed me again, this time slower, like a vow we hadn't spoken yet. "It still feels impossible," I confessed. Caleb's thumb traced my knuckles. "I know," he murmured. "That's why it's worth it." And just like that, grief and love didn't cancel each other out. They arrived together, messy and honest, both refusing to be postponed. I had thought courage meant telling the world who you were. But in that theater hall, among old posters and stage dust, among laughter and quiet, courage meant something sharper. It meant saying the truth to the only person who could hold it without running away. And Caleb didn't run.